Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special spooky Halloween edition of Real Stories. I know I've been gone for a while, but I am planning on coming back on a regular basis. So, without any further ado, let's get started. I've got 3 spooky tales that I can't wait to tell you guys. A few years back, when I was around 18 years old, I entered a very rebellious phase in my life. I have always been a prodigy child, always did as I was told, never stayed out late. I didn't smoke, I didn't drink. I scored the highest grades in all of my classes. All my family, my friends, and my friends' family thought I was the perfect kid. But then, something changed. I was on a lot of medication due to my health, and I started going through bouts of depression. I started to act up like never before. I stopped going to school. I would stay in bed all day. I didn't talk to anyone. And then slowly, I started talking to strangers online. Initially, it was just talking to them. I would talk to a few people until I found someone interesting. I would dedicate all my time talking to them, till they no longer held my interest, and then I'd move on to the next person. This went on for about a year. Then, I eventually started meeting these people in person. Most of these meetings were sexual, and I was very reckless. I slept around with more people than I'd like to admit, and regardless of my lack of concern for my own safety, I somehow never met anyone that had evil intentions. We'd meet a couple of times, do the dirty, and then that was that. Until I met this one guy. I was talking to a couple of guys at the time. I wasn't in any sort of relationship, but just being a hoe. So this guy starts talking to me and asks me about my hobbies, my interests, what I do. I told him I do not smoke or drink, and he was shocked. I told him it wasn't that I never had done it. I'd tried it, but just felt like it wasn't my thing. We talked for a couple of weeks. I ended up talking about how I've been going through depression, and at first, he just listened. Eventually, he started telling me how I should try smoking. It would relieve my anxiety and my stress, he told me. And I always turned it down. But he was relentless. After a month or so of talking online, we decided to meet. We had never had any sort of sexual conversation or anything, so we were just going to meet as friends. I was supposed to meet another guy, an acquaintance, for something I needed. So I suggested to the guy online that we meet briefly for lunch, and then he could drop me off to the other guy's place. He agreed, and we decided on where and when to go. The day we were supposed to meet, we met at a local cafe. We had brunch, then I got in his car for him to drop me off at the place I needed to go. It was a good 45-minute drive, so I put on some songs and decided to relax. 5 minutes into the drive, he offers me a cigarette. I declined. He insisted and kept insisting until I gave up and agreed. I opened the box, and there was only one cigarette in there. I told him it was his last one, and I asked him if he was sure he wanted me to smoke it since he would have enjoyed it much more than I would have. He said yes. I took the cigarette out, and there was something odd about it. It didn't look like it was store-bought. It rather looked like it had been rolled by hand. But then I again had never smoked enough cigarettes to be sure, so I lit it and smoked it. I couldn't even smoke half of it. It made me inexplicably nauseous. So I gave up halfway through and offered it to him. Instead of smoking it, he puts it out and threw it away. Weird, but assumed he probably didn't want to smoke while driving. 30 minutes into the ride, I started feeling very sick. My whole body was shaking. I was extremely nauseous, and I could barely keep my eyes open. I kept telling him that I wasn't feeling good and that maybe we should go to the nearest ER instead of where I was going, but he kept telling me to relax and lay back. Everything about that ride felt off. I told him to stop the car and drop me off wherever we were. He refused. All I could think of was pulling my phone out and calling the police. When he noticed what I was doing, he immediately stopped the car and I got off. I couldn't stand, so I sat on the roadside and called the guy I was originally supposed to visit. He immediately drove to where I was and picked me up. He took me to his place where I threw up all over his living room multiple times. For the next hour and a half, I just laid on the couch, my whole body shaking and constantly throwing up. The guy brought me water, gave me some electrolytes, and kept insisting that I go to the hospital, but I refused. I had no idea what I had smoked, but I was sure it wasn't just a plain old cigarette. I was scared that if it was some illegal drug, that the hospital would catch on and I would get into trouble. And I absolutely did not want my parents finding out what I had been up to. So I laid there, kept throwing up, and letting whatever that stuff was get out of my system. All these years later, I am now married to the guy who picked me up on the roadside and helped me through an insanely embarrassing time. Oh, and to the guy that laced my cigarette, let's not meet. Ooh, yikes, guys. This is why we never smoke cigarettes. Cigs are nasty. No matter if it's been dipped in something, whatever, say no to tobacco and cigs. That's gross. Anyways, back to the story. So our author is going through, some mental health struggles, as a lot of us did, especially when she was 18. I remember going through stuff when I was 18. And she's kind of going through a little bit of a hoe phase. This is not to slut shame any of our listeners. I am with you guys. Do whatever makes you happy. Just be safe about it. That's just the term that is used if you're not hip to the slang of today's youth. Yeah, so she's talking to people online and then meeting them up in person, which can be pretty risky, not gonna lie. It's a good idea that if you're going to participate in such activities, that you should meet them in a safe place, like somewhere in the open where there are witnesses and maybe cameras, like a restaurant. And that's what she did. Things only went bad when she asked for a ride to a second location that was about 45 minutes away. Now that's a pretty lengthy car ride. And the guy that she was meeting up with, for the first time, mind you, tries to give her a cig while they're in the car. Now, again, cigs are gross, but he's persistent, so she eventually is just like, what the heck? I don't care. Now, there's only one left, and she said that it looked like it was hand-rolled. So when stuff is hand-rolled, it's really hard to trust it because you never know what somebody put in it. He could have put whatever he wanted to. He could have sprinkled some dust or whatever, PCP, could have been dipped. There's all types of crazy stuff that can go into things to be smoked. So it's hard to know what you're getting yourself involved in. Now, unfortunately for her, this guy was being really creepy when she was definitely feeling the effects of whatever this was that she had just smoked. It was also a red flag when he didn't smoke it either. He was just like, oh, no, it's cool. Even though you're feeling sick, just like lay back and chill. And she's like, no, like I'm not feeling well. You need to pull over the car. And when she threatens and is about to call the cops, that's when he just is like, okay, and pulls over and she gets out. Now, unfortunately for her, she's not in a good state. But luckily for her, and low-key hero of the story, her other guy who she was going to meet up with afterwards comes and saves her in this scenario by getting her to his place where she can kind of puke and just get whatever this is out of her system and just chill and let this pass through. Now, would it have been a better idea to go to the hospital? Absolutely. But she was very nervous. Like she said that, her parents would get mad at her, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, guys, when you're worried about going to the hospital because your parents are going to be mad, they're going to be upset if you're dead. They don't care if you have to go to the hospital if it means that it helped you out and saved your life potentially. They are always going to want you to be okay. Yes, they would like you to be honest, but at the same time, when it comes to stuff like that, you got to prioritize your health. So I'm sure she knows this moving forward, but to all you guys, if you ever unfortunately find yourself in that scenario, go to the hospital because you really don't know what you took. And maybe you're having some adverse reaction. She said she was throwing up for hours. That's not good. So luckily it kind of just passed through, but definitely go to the hospital. It's really sweet that she ended up marrying the guy who picked her up because honestly, he was there when she needed him. So he seems, from this very short sample size, like a stand-up guy. So shout out to him. Little hero of the story. But yeah, guys, be careful and be very cautious when hitting strangers or randoms items because you don't know what they put in it. You don't know them. So best to only smoke things that you know where they came from or that you've done yourself. So just be careful, guys. And if you're going to meet up with people in public, share your location with a trusted friend. Even if you're too scared to tell your parents, tell your homies. I remember specifically in group chats that I've been in when some of my homies were going to meet some girl out in who knows what, Ohio, they would send their location just in case anything happened. And you might think that it's a joke, but you really never know what's going to happen. Sometimes people can get set up. It can happen to men. It can happen to women. It can happen to anybody. So just be careful when you're talking to people online and meeting up with people for the first time. We'll be right back with more creepy stories after this word from today's sponsor, BetterHelp. Hey guys, how are you doing today? Really ask yourself that and be honest. Life is stressful. There's so much going on in the world right now. And if you're thinking that you may be feeling stressed or depressed or anxious, having somebody to talk to can really help you out. And if you need somebody, might I recommend BetterHelp. BetterHelp offers licensed therapists who are trained to listen and help you. You can talk to your therapist in an online environment at your convenience. And they have a broad range of expertise in their network of over 20,000 therapists. And they give you access to help that may not be available in your area. You just fill out a quick questionnaire to help assess your specific needs, and then you can get matched with a therapist in as little as 48 hours. You can then schedule video and phone sessions, plus exchange unlimited messages with your therapist. You can also request a new therapist at any time for no additional charge. So join the 3 million plus people who have taken charge of their mental health with an experienced BetterHelp therapist. Get 10% off at betterhelp.com/realstories. That's betterhelp.com/realstories. All one word. Supporting our sponsors helps support the show, so do yourself a favor, take care of your mental health, take care of yourselves, and support the show. Give BetterHelp a try today. Now let's get back to the show. AIM was a big thing when I turned 13, which stood for, you guessed it, AOL Instant Messenger. It was around 2002, and I would have been a fresh 13 years old in 8th grade. I had many times when I went in chat rooms by myself or with friends goofing around. Unfortunately, unsolicited photos were a thing then too, but usually you could stay clear of it by choosing the chat room you entered wisely. I didn't have any photos of myself, and plus, this was back when you had to take a digital photo and upload it from your camera. Plus, I was 13 and self-conscious, which I'm pretty sure anyone can relate with. But one day, a guy popped up on my screen wanting to chat. It went fine at first. I was very naive back then, and we quickly fell into a pattern of talking. He told me his name was Dave and that he lived in California. Eventually, he ended up telling me that he loved me, but the problem was he was, quote, 19. Now, I wasn't proud of this at first, being 13. I just sent him pictures of some random girl and said it was me. He instantly fell for me, telling me age is just a number and how mature I was. Now, at this point, he did not live, quote, in state, so there was never any chance of us meeting. Eventually, he told me he and his mom were moving up to a city that was about an hour and a half away from me. He started begging to come see me, or to go to a movie, or to do anything. I had to break the catfishing truth and say that those were not pictures of me, but of someone else. He was furious. He had been looking forward to a different type of child this whole time. Dave forgave me a few days later, saying, "I still want to meet you because I love you." All the things you say to a young girl to get her to swoon. I think back and I'm like, wow, I was 13. So I told my best friend everything that I had just explained, and that I wanted her to go with me to meet him. There was a whole plan about him driving to see me and us going to the movies so he could finally see the love of his life. I had been brainwashed into believing that this was normal. I didn't tell my mom, of course, and honestly, she didn't notice anything that was going on to begin with. So the day my friend and I were going to meet up with Dave, her mom came and picked us up from school. She said something that made my stomach drop into nothingness. She said, "Chrissy, you are not going to the movies. You are not going to meet that man. You are going to get seriously hurt or kidnapped, and I can't allow you guys to go." I cried and cried because I honestly thought that I could handle everything and be fine. She told me she wasn't going to tell my mom. I had to promise to never speak to him again and never plan on meeting another stranger online. He ended up showing up and was upset that I wasn't there. He went on AIM, flying off the handle like I hadn't seen at that age. It scared me. It scared me how close I was to this man being near me. I never talked to Dave again, but I easily believe that I would have been kidnapped or worse that day if my best friend's mom hadn't stepped in. My mom would have been none the wiser. I was none the wiser myself. But I am here today, and I learned a dire lesson. Wow, she really dodged a bullet on that one. That was some real scary to catch a predator type stuff right there. That was literally like the thing that they used on that show all the time. It was some meetup with some underage person, and they knew that they were too old to be meeting up with this person. This guy lied and most likely was not 19. Who knows how old he was, but this has Chris Hansen written all over it. No meetup should have ever happened because this guy was claiming to be 19, knowing that this girl was 13. That's disgusting. That's crazy. That's not good. So she almost went through with it, though, because she's a 13-year-old and she doesn't know any better. She doesn't know that people are real life scary and will hurt you if they can. Luckily, hero of the story, her best friend's mom. So our author planned to meet up with this guy by going to the movies with her friend. So also potentially endangering her friend. However, her friend's mom tells her, "You're not going. This is insane. You could be hurt. You could get kidnapped." And thank God that she did, because this girl had every intention of going. And this guy claimed to have moved to be closer to her, which is even scarier. If that's even true, who knows? Because you never know with these people how much they're lying about, but it's just a real bullet dodged for our author. So not a lot of stuff that I feel like I need to explain from this story and what not to do. Try and stick to people around your age. You know, there's some exceptions where people date slightly older people than them, but for the most part, stay in your age range. And he even tried to say like the creepy R. Kelly stuff of like age ain't nothing but a number. That's not true. That is very much not true. It is much more than a number. But this guy was lying. So there's nothing to talk about. This guy's just some weird creep. And it's just a really uncomfortable story. Yikes. We'll be back with our third story after a word from our new sponsor, CBDX.com. CBDX is an American company that offers the highest quality Delta 8 THC, Delta 9 THC, and HHC products. They offer lightning fast shipping and the best prices with outstanding customer service. All of their products are made in-house. They're not just slapping their label onto some other company's products. And they have a wide variety of products for any level of experience that you may have in this cannabinoid field. Because what these are legal cannabinoids. So they have gummies, vape cartridges, straight up flour, and other oils. So really, you can look and find whatever you're looking for whatever experience that you want to have. They have products designed for a chill night, for being creative, for just enjoying and relaxing during your day. Whatever you need, whatever level you are, whether you're a beginner or someone who's more of a connoisseur like myself in this field, they have products for everybody. I highly recommend their gummies because they are delicious and they are effective. So go to cbdx.com and look over their products and use promo code TINO, T-I-N-O, for 10% off your order. You must be 21 years of age or older to buy products on here. cbdx.com, promo code TINO, for 10% off. This story takes place in 2018, back when I lived in the suburbs of Paris. I've been playing Pokemon Go since its release, and I used to go out all night to play, always with my best friends on a voice call. It was a night like any other, following my usual route. It was around 2 a.m., and I had already covered a good 2 kilometers. I found myself about 1 kilometer away from home, standing near a Pokestop, catching what I could while talking to my friend, just like every night. It was a residential street with a few streetlights, but quite dark as there was a field just behind it. After about 5 minutes, I noticed a man in his 30s on the opposite sidewalk, just a few meters from me, holding Hedge shears in his hand, and there was a pile of branches at his feet. I thought the man was just trimming the branches of his tree. However, when I described the scene to my friend, he said, "You should leave right away. No one does gardening in the middle of the night." Despite my friend's warning, I was so focused on Pokemon Go that I wanted to capture all the Pokemon I could before leaving. So I stayed, while keeping an eye on this guy. As I looked at the man, I realized he wasn't cutting any branches. He was only staring at me. He would occasionally move and hide behind a parked van nearby while spying on me through the windows. However, he knew very well that I could see him, and I began to feel scared. Despite my friends pleading for me to leave, I still hadn't caught all the Pokemon, so I hesitated to go. The man continued his strange behavior, crossing over to my side of the street and then hiding behind some bushes while staring at me. Then, he went back to his pile of branches and stared at me again. Finally, I had enough. I decided to leave. I walked normally toward my home, trying not to show any fear. I had a straight path back home. My friend on the phone asked me to check behind me in case this guy was following me. Indeed, he was, still holding the Hedge shears, about 10 meters behind me. I then made a left turn instead of going straight, even though it made my route longer. I wanted to be sure that he was following me and that it wasn't a coincidence. He continued to follow me. I picked up my pace, taking snaps just in case something happened. When I reached the end of the street, I was out of breath, but safe. There was no one behind me. I entered my home, feeling relieved. Suddenly, a white car pulled up right in front, stopped, and the driver's window rolled down. It was the man with the pruning shears. Now, he knew where I lived. I rushed inside, locked everything, grabbed a kitchen knife, and waited until someone woke up so I could go to bed. Luckily, there were no further incidents. Nobody believed me, though. So we checked the surveillance cameras at home, and unfortunately, I was right. Oh boy. Guys, please do not risk your life for Pokemon Go. Can we be a little bit serious, please? There were so many red flags in this story. Goodness gracious. Luckily, the game is not as popular, so I don't think people are out and about. But I remember when Pokemon Go was popping. Your boy never played because I was never really into all that. But I remember seeing people walking around doing that. However, in this story, our author is out at 2 a.m. There's an old saying that not a lot of good things happen past 1 a.m. And for the most part, it's pretty true. A lot of sketchy stuff happens because people like to conceal their weird behavior through the darkness of the night. So when you're out and about past midnight, you gotta be on your P's and Q's. Just be diligent. So in this story, our author is out playing Pokemon Go at 2 a.m., just walking around. Now, luckily, they are on the phone with their friend, but while they're on the phone with their friend playing Pokemon Go, they see a guy on the other side of the street where they're at holding hedge shears, which are basically like a big giant pair of kind of sideways scissors. If you need some reference, I don't know, Google it if you want a visual. But either way, it's a weapon. And hedge shears are used for cutting bushes. However, it's 2 a.m. and nobody is gardening at this time, so that should be perceived as a weapon because it is. So her friend is smart and tells her to leave. So she does not go because she wants to catch all these stupid Pokemon, even though her friend tells her to go and the situation is incredibly sketchy. So luckily, eventually she comes to her senses and decides to go home. But she's kind of starting to be followed. So she takes an alternate route that kind of makes her journey take a little bit longer. And she did this to be absolutely sure that this guy was following her. After he was staring at her and moving locations and he kept staring at her, it's like, yo, I think he's following you. He's been staring at you for like a minute now. So she eventually gets home, which is great. But then this guy pulls up in a car, and then she fears the worst because now he knows where she lives. Now, she does what a lot of scared kids do and just grabs a kitchen knife and just tries to prepare for the worst. But luckily, she had surveillance cameras at her house because people didn't believe her. Because it's a little out there as far as stories go. But, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities at all. I don't put it past people to do stuff that's weird at 2 a.m., especially if you're just out and about on a random street. Like, most people who aren't up to anything weird are probably at home or with other people or going to bed, something in that nature. They're not just standing outside with shears. That's really weird. So, luckily nothing happened, but definitely a very creepy story. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of Real Stories. This week you have heard The Man with the Hedge Shears by Fragrant Grape 3262. Then, AOL was popular when I was 13 by Thenburyher. And finally, Laced Cigarette by littlemissicantdoit. All stories were read with the permission of their respective authors, and if you have a story that you would like to hear on the show, please email it to me at thearspodcast@gmail.com. That's thearspodcast@gmail.com. And you can remain anonymous if you would like to. Now, you might be thinking, but Tino, why are you not doing ghosts and stuff like that on a Halloween episode? And that's valid. However, what did Scooby-Doo teach us? That the scariest monsters are just people. So I felt like, why not just do some Let's Not Meet stories? Because that is real fear. Because people still like to debate whether ghosts are real or not, even though they absolutely are. But one thing that is undeniable is that there are some really creepy bad people out there. So I wanted to share some of these stories to just make sure that you're paying attention to your surroundings, you're being careful when you're meeting people online, and that you're just being safe and being smart. So with that being said, have a fun and safe Halloween, and I will see you next time with a brand new episode. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe, tell a friend, and shout out to cbdx.com, and shout out to BetterHelp. Go support them because that supports the show. Peace out, guys.